This is Lisa from Mobile Tech Review, and today we're doing a comparison smackdown between two ultrabooks. Well, one technically isn't an ultrabook because it runs Mac OS, came out before the whole Intel Ultrabook initiative, but a lot of people are shopping on both, so we're going to compare them. On the right, we have the Dell XPS 13. It's the latest ultrabook on the block. It's a 13.3-inch ultrabook, just like the MacBook Air. It's 13-inch as well. And it has a smaller footprint, as you can see here. Smaller than most 13 inches. It's not quite as deep. Not quite as skinny, certainly not on the front edge as the Mac is, but about the same on the back, a little bit thicker. Both have aluminum lids. Both have curvy designs. It looks like we can tell where Dell was getting their inspiration there from looks. But as we take a look around at the bottom, we notice some differences. 13-inch MacBook Air has your basic aluminum bottom. Very pretty, very standard, now very copied by several manufacturers. And the Dell goes with something really, really cool, carbon fiber. So you have that classic carbon fiber kind of checkered pattern here. And under here, this is where all your ugly little Windows labels are and your service tag number and all that kind of thing. So Dell hid them under a little metal plate. So the nice thing about this guy is it's not slippery, it doesn't get really hot, nor does it get really cold, and it's very rugged and light. And it wraps all the way around the edges, so it makes for a really neat visual effect on the side. Very cool, and something a little different. Now as we take a look inside, you can see that any similarity in design really ends. Mac is very light silvery aluminum on the inside, and Dell goes with their black deck, which we like a lot. Now this is magnesium alloy, this deck here, and they've got soft touch black paint on it. And they both have isolation style keyboards, and I've always liked the MacBook Air keyboard quite a bit, but I have to say that I like the Dell's even better. Sculpted keys, even more travel, very nice even backlighting on both of these guys. But boy, the Dell is just such a dream to type on, and there's no keyboard flex whatsoever. Both of them have their row of multimedia control keys combined with FN up top, and it's your choice which way you want the Dell to go. You can hit the FN key to use those, or you can not, and that's settable in BIOS. And another difference as we'll take a look is you've got your standard bezel here, silver around the display, and this guy has edge-to-edge Gorilla Glass, which, well, it looks pretty cool, and obviously it makes it a little bit more durable in terms of accidental cracking, scratching, and all that kind of thing. Now, I don't really worry about scratching my notebook displays much. They just don't tend to come in contact with anything, but anything that's at all crack or shatter resistant is always good in my book for something this portable. Both are certainly aesthetically pleasing machines. In fact, I think this is the prettiest thing Dell has ever made. Very nice, clean, modern lines. They've gotten rid of the weird little doodads that they added on for the XPS 15Z, for example. No bizarre spiral hinges anymore. And they both have roomy buttonless trackpads. Of course, if you're going to use Mac OS, then nothing beats the trackpad that Apple makes when used with Mac OS, because they just have top-notch drivers for their large glass trackpad. Now, if you're going to run Windows, if you're going to buy a MacBook Air just to run Windows, I always say, well, that wouldn't be my first choice. There's a lot of nice ultrabooks on the market right now, and the MacBook Air really is tuned to work best with Mac OS. If you put Windows on it, you lose battery life, the trackpad drivers aren't as great, you're stuck with generic Intel graphics drivers, that kind of thing. So I would really lean towards getting a Windows Ultrabook if Windows is your bag. Of course, if you're on Mac OS, then awesome. MacBook Air obviously is the choice. Display resolution on the Mac is a little bit higher. It's 1440 by 900, and part of this has to do with the different aspect ratio that Apple favors. So the Dell is 1366 by 768. That's your kind of standard Ultrabook Windows resolution, so you're losing some pixels there, both side and top to bottom. Neither of these is available with a higher resolution display, however. Apple really believes in usability and readability, and I think they don't like the idea of trying to squeeze super high resolution into small panels. And Dell kind of made the same decision. They decided that this was a good compromise for readability and all that kind of thing. In terms of colors and color accuracy, they're both quite good, and the Dell is better than some other Ultrabooks in terms of just good color representation. Has nice contrast, not super duper high. But the Mac has better viewing angles. Now, the Dell is better than some. Again, it's better than the Toshiba Portage Z830, for example, and the HP Folio when it comes to viewing angles. Even the ZenBook has fairly limited viewing angles. So Dell's above average among Windows ones, but the Mac still leads all of those guys. Both are glossy displays, both have glare. However, I would say the MacBook Air glares a little bit less. Both can get pretty bright, but the Dell has higher brightness in terms of nits. And both have stereo audio out. Now, Ultrabooks, you're not going to get a whole lot of oomph and loudness out of them, but Dell did a really nice job, I have to say, with the Dell audio on that. Speakers, they fire from right around here, and you get really good sounding surround sound and louder volume than with the MacBook Air. Now, neither of these are award-winning audio. These are not going to beat your 17-inch Quasmio or something like that, but as audio goes, the Dell gets a little bit of an edge there. When it comes to ports, again, they're going to be pretty similar because you're constrained given the footprint, the size of the motherboard that's available, and the fact that people were in some ways, well, going with whatever Apple did. So let's take a look at our ports now. MacBook Air has only USB 2.0. For some reason, Apple doesn't do 3.0 yet, so we have our SD card slot, one USB 2.0 port here, and our mini display port combined with Thunderbolt over here. So you can drive large monitors with this guy using mini display port, or if you get Apple's Thunderbolt display, either way. And on this side we have a combo mic headphone jack, another USB 2.0 port, and charging. That's it. The Dell has, first off, a neat little battery indicator here. Press that and you can see you've got 5 LEDs to let you know how much charge you have. Here's your USB 3.0 port. There's your mini display port. Again, it can drive large monitors. And on this side we've got the combo mic headphone jack, a USB 2.0 port, and your charging port. So neither of these guys has Ethernet. You're going to have to use a USB Ethernet adapter if you need Ethernet. So it's pretty much a draw on ports. The Dell gets a little edge for having a USB 3.0 port, but then the MacBook Air fights back with that Thunderbolt port. Now there's not exactly a glut of Thunderbolt products on the market yet, but who knows, in the future there might be, and meanwhile you can use it, as I said, for Apple's Thunderbolt display, and there's some mass storage solutions and stuff like that for Thunderbolt available too. In terms of price, you know the drill. Everybody tries to be a little bit cheaper than the MacBook Air in the world of Windows, unless they're making something fancy and luxury-oriented like the HP NV14 Spectre, which we also have a smackdown with the MacBook Air for. So Dell starts at $999 versus $1299 for the Apple MacBook Air. And for that you get a Core i5 ULV Sandy Bridge CPU. Mac is 1.7 gigahertz versus 1.6 on the Dell. We see them several Ultrabooks either having 1.7 or 1.6. Really, the performance difference is nothing to speak about there. Both have 4 gigs of DDR3 RAM that are soldered on the motherboard, so it's not upgradable. And they both have 128 gig SSD drives for that. Now you can move up to $1699 and get a Core i7 ULV on the MacBook Pro, 1.8 gigahertz, and likewise you can do that with the Dell. And you can get 256 gig SATA SSD drives. Now the top of the line Dell is $1499, and that gets you that 1.8 gigahertz Core i7 and the 256 gig SSD. And then there's a middle path too, where you can stick with the Core i5 and get the 256 gig SSD, which I would recommend more because, gosh, 128 gigs after you have Windows installed and stuff, there's not much space. It's always a tight fit. Whereas the difference between the Core i5 and Core i7, it's not really going to make much difference in your day-to-day life using the machine, even if you're using something like Photoshop. So price, you're looking at about $200 to $300 less depending on the configuration for the Dell versus the MacBook Air. One thing we'll note about the Dell in terms of performance, they use the Samsung PM830 SSD drive rather. That's the fastest SSD that we've found so far that you can put in a notebook. And that is a SATA 3 drive, so really good performance out of that. We just give them a big thumbs up over pretty much all the other Ultrabooks on the market right now for having that really fast drive. ASUS also goes with a SATA 3 drive in their ZenBook as well, but so far the Samsung is the faster performer in 128 and 256 gig configurations. Battery life on Ultrabooks is pretty good, and with the Mac running Mac OS, note that because it has better battery life when it's actually running Mac OS, we get about 6 hours. Now this is my personal MacBook Air. I've been using this one for several months, and I can say that after months it's still running at about 6 hours running Mac OS. When I run Windows, the power optimization isn't nearly as good. I only see around 4 or so. With the Dell XPS 13, again, about 6 hours of use. Depends on where you're setting your display brightness and all that kind of thing, but keeping it about 50% on each of these machines, also getting about 6 hours. So battery life is comparable. Neither of these has a removable battery. You have to kind of take apart the things and disassemble them to access the battery that is inside. In terms of heat and fan noise, MacBook Air actually runs fairly cool and fairly quiet. I hardly ever hear the fan, even when I'm driving pretty hard using Photoshop with a big 30-inch monitor attached to it. It doesn't get too hot. Of course, it's aluminum on the bottom that transfers heat more. It will feel hotter, but it very rarely gets anything like what I call truly uncomfortable. But you'll feel some warmth there. The Dell XPS 13 has a carbon fiber bottom, so that stays cooler. It doesn't toast up your lap nearly as much. So in terms of heat, the Dell is excellent. In terms of actually monitoring the CPU temperatures inside, they're both pretty similar. They both run about 45 to 50 doing light tasks. The Dell, when we first got it, had a pretty noisy fan, but Dell's already come out with a BIOS update that quieted the fan. Now if you work it hard, you'll hear that fan. You'll hear it on either one of them then again. But after a couple of days for it to index the hard drive and undo all of its work, it's completely actually silent now. Right now, neither of these is running the fan. Both have a webcam and a built-in mic. The Dell has a pretty good facial recognition application installed, so you can actually have it take a look at you using the webcam to log on. Now we've seen that from a lot of notebook manufacturers. Lenovo does it, Asus does it, others do it, and it very rarely works well. With the Dell, it actually works pretty reliably. In terms of graphics, you're looking at Intel HD 3000 integrated graphics on both of these. There is no dedicated GPU option for either of these units. Dell uses all Intel parts, so you get Intel WiDi wireless display. That's because they have both Intel Wi-Fi inside and Intel integrated graphics. So you can use that to wirelessly send a movie over to your TV if you've got something like the Netgear push the TV adapter plugged into the HDMI port of your TV or receiver. So it's pretty neat. You can just use your TV as a second monitor, play a movie on there while you're actually using your Dell to do real work. So that's our Dell XPS 13 Ultrabook versus 13-inch MacBook Air comparison and smackdown. And obviously they each have their good points. If money is an issue, the Dell is certainly more attractive because it's cheaper. That's true of a lot of Windows Ultrabooks. And I would say you can't go wrong with either one. Now personally, if I wanted to run Windows, I would go with the Windows Ultrabook because they are optimized to run Windows well, whereas the Mac is really optimized to run Mac OS X well, and Apple really doesn't spend a whole lot of time trying to come up with really great Windows drivers. I mean, it runs Windows okay, but things like battery life, trackpad, and display graphics performance aren't as tweaked as they are on something that is designed to run Windows. They're both really durable, they both use premium materials, you've got metal casings, and you get Gorilla Glass for the display on the Dell. You do get slightly higher resolution on the MacBook Air though. I'm Lisa from Mobile Tech Review. Be sure to watch our video review of both of these products, read our full written reviews, and subscribe to our YouTube channel.